This is The Resilient Life, where we believe that every human will struggle in this life. Our challenge is to struggle well. I'm Ryan Mannion. I lost my brother to war, my mom to cancer, and I'm the daughter of a retired Marine. I'm also a wife, mom, author, and president of one of the nation's leading veteran service organizations. Join me and some incredible guests as we explore the value of struggling well through life's inevitable challenges. Welcome to another episode of the Resilient Life podcast. I'm geeking out a little bit about today's guest because I've been looking to have her on for a long time, and she's finally here. And I'm so excited to interview her, the CEO of Barstool Sports, Erika Ayers. Erika, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
I gotta say, it's a little bit nerve-wracking to, be recording a podcast with you. You run a company that is known for killer podcasts. So
you're doing great.
Well, I had shared with Erika before the show, I was really looking to connect with her because, one of the things that I shared with you when we talked, Erika, was that I love that you are leading such a male-dominated company. And that's a lot of things that I've been dealing with and a lot of the struggles that I've dealt with over the last 15 years running a veteran service organization, being a woman, not a veteran, and kind of entering into this new industry. And, that didn't happen overnight, of course, for you. You've got a ton of stuff in your background that led you to this position. But I was listening to you on a Business Insider podcast, and they had titled it "How I Beat Out 74 Men to Land My Dream Job." So let's talk about that a little bit. How did you beat out 74 men to land your dream job?
I don't know. It's funny. I didn't really think about it. I think that if you have a lot of passion about what you do and you work hard at it and you're committed to it, it's like all the other shit just kind of falls away. And I think this is true in the military. I think this is true in business. I think this is true in life. But I don't, I feel really fortunate, which is I don't think about my gender a lot at work. Like, for sure, I showed up at Barstool Sports. Like, we had one bathroom. I was the only girl. It was disgusting. Like, there were hardships, quote unquote. But, I think the reason I got the job and all those guys didn't is, really has nothing to do with being a woman. I think it more so had to do with, I loved the brand. I lived in Boston when Dave Portnoy created it. I had a lot of passion about the commerce business and creating. I was working in music before I started at Barstool, and I really believed that if Justin Bieber could make you feel a certain way about a song, you might want to wear the lyrics on a t-shirt. Like, I really believed that, and I spent a lot of time on it. And Barstool, I thought, could be the king of that or the queen of that. Like, there was so much potential. There were so many funny things that Barstool was just on top of, that having someone want to wear that and give you money to buy it just felt like an extension of the experience. So I think sharing that with Dave, that passion and that the vision and the ideas for that, as well as, I didn't ask Barstool to change. I think most of the men who interviewed for the job, or all of them really, one, I was the only woman. So it's like, I think it was, kind of freak chance I got the job anyways, but most of them were really conservative. And I don't mean like conservative in politics. I mean, like, they wore buttoned up dress shirts. They talked about their MBAs. They talked about like they didn't talk about the thrill and the mess and the chaos and everything. I was really blunt, like things that were so stupid that Barstool was doing, and also things that were so brilliant. And I just don't think anyone, I think when most people interview for jobs, quite honestly, they don't get into the specifics enough to have a really accurate conversation. So long story short, like, I'm so fortunate I got the job. I'm psyched. We've had, an awesome run here. But I really think that the reason I got it was that I cared more. I was willing to work harder. I didn't expect them to change or to be something that they weren't. I embraced them for who they were. And I had a big vision for what they could be.
Yeah. Well, I think too, when you think about what Dave Portnoy created at the beginning, it was, it was and still continues to be a little bit controversial, right? And so when you're putting on your big boy pants and you're like, we're going to hire a CEO, I think probably a lot of people expected to come in and say, this is how I'm going to professionalize this company.
Totally.
And that's not what he was probably looking for. And, you guys say you're kind of anti-PC on purpose, and it works. That's part of the business model, I would imagine.
Yeah, it's interesting. I always, for a while, I wanted to mainstream Barstool. When I got to Barstool, Barstool was really regional. It was Northeast. It was the Northeast corridor. It was Boston. It was Philly. It was New York. Predominantly, it was a little bit of Chicago. But what I really wanted first and foremost was just to legitimize them and to enable them to create more content. These guys, at the beginning, there were just guys. And then obviously we've hired a ton of women, and we do way more than just sports and comedy at this point. But they were so funny. They had so much to say. They worked so hard. They were so earnest about what they did. And I really wanted to give them more opportunities and more places to put that. And to be honest, in my head, I was like, I'll clean them up later. Like I'll professionalize this later. But we had to get there in our own way. And I think, one of the biggest things I learned early on was we aren't going to mainstream through somebody else's channel. It's not, ESPN isn't going to be like, ooh, Barstool Sports is great. We're actually going to take the opposite approach and compete with ESPN. So, I really think the biggest thing, I've learned a lot from Dave in it too, which is you have to be true to yourself. You have to be authentic. You have to be strong and fierce about who you are, what you believe in, what you want to accomplish. And you got to block out, I think people spend so much time trying to appease the people who don't like them or who are skeptical of them or who resist them. And it's like, I had said that from when I got to Barstool, which is I could have spent the last 7 years apologizing for every single stupid, offensive, controversial, off-color thing these guys have ever said, but that wouldn't get us forward. Like that's not going to move us anywhere. And it honestly is not going to appease the people. I used to say this all the time when I got to Barstool, which is Barstool's offended most everyone. So it's like I would be a nonstop apologist if that was the path I decided to take. Right. I didn't want to take that path. And so I think that's something that applies no matter what industry you're in or what job you have or what path you want to take.
Did you ever or have you ever worried about the phenomenon that has blown up in the past 2-3 years of this, this cancel culture, right? Like you say the wrong thing or you did something 15 years ago that the tape comes out and you're done. And have you ever worried about that as it pertains to Barstool? I think most specifically with Dave, and I think he's done a great job of being a non-apologist for the things he says, the things he does. But I mean, gosh, people have tried to cancel him. I feel like they try to cancel him every week.
Yeah, for sure. I'm very protective of Dave. I think Dave is probably one of the most, if not the most honest person I've ever met, like to a fault. Like that guy will tell you exactly what he thinks, whether you want to hear it or not. And I think that's one of Dave's, honestly, his best qualities. And I think it's what makes him so captivating is he calls it like it is and he says it like it is. And he's not trying to be liked. And he is not afraid of who he is, good and bad, PC and not. So I always worry about that kind of stuff, like the cancellation. And I think, one is you got to be mindful of what you say and how you say it. And obviously media and culture and entertainment have changed so dramatically. Like if you watch a popular action movie from the year 2000, which I don't even think is that long ago, but it is, right. You'll be like, oh my God, I can't believe they're saying that. I can't believe they did that. Like, I was listening to like a 50s, oh my God, there's like this reggae remix of this, like some 50s song. And it's like, if she's, shit, I'm going to forget the name, but long story short, there's a line in the song that if her daddy's rich, like take her out for a meal. And if her daddy's poor, What
Just
is that song?
Just do what you feel.
Just do what you feel. Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
So anyway, so I was listening to that the other day and I was like, oh my God, I can't believe people say that. I can't believe people were allowed to say that. People were allowed to say that. So culture has changed a lot. And obviously, to your question, it's gotten way more rigid and it's way more polarizing and there's so much more backlash. We've really fought cancellation because we're not afraid. Like, now, when we have stupid people do stupid things, which happens also very often here, like there's consequence for that. And we take that action and we take that very seriously. When we have an opinion that we feel strongly about and we want to stand behind, then we stand behind it. We don't hide after we say it. And I think that's a lot of what's happening now in culture is something happens and then people go hide. And it's like, well, then just the pitchforks are going to come kill you.
Yeah, absolutely. I had just read an article not too long ago about The Office, which is one of my all-time favorite shows.
Sure.
And it was like, would The Office be canceled today? Would it even,
you couldn't make The Office today.
No, you couldn't make it. I mean, every episode would be so
offensive. Yeah.
That's what makes it so freaking funny, right?
Yeah, that's right.
And I think a lot of, with Barstool, I love the Sunday conversations that Caleb, I don't know his last name, but that he does.
Presley, yeah.
Yeah, I love those. And I learn a lot about, he has a lot of athletes. I don't know who they are, but I start watching these and I'm dying. I mean, they are so stinking hilarious. And I found that I think Barstool does such a good job of bringing people in to the sports world through comedy,
Totally.
Yeah.
Totally. I'm interrupting.
I would not watch, a 30-second reel or a 2-minute reel on one of these athletes if it was on ESPN, because it would be very serious. It would be asking these questions. So I love the way that you guys do that. I think it's brilliant. And I think one of the things when you look at it, Barstool is so multifaceted. I think it's a sports company, right? So you start out that way, but if you look back on 2022, like what was your favorite aspect of something that you guys did this past year? Because you've grown into so much more.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think Caleb is just crushing it. Like Sunday Conversations, if people here haven't watched Sunday Conversations, it's hilarious. It's hosted by a guy named Caleb Presley, who has a sophisticated, juvenile, culturally relevant, kind of evil line of he's very, very funny. It's a completely, I would say, it's just a totally fresh interview show.
Yep.
And what's super interesting to your point, Ryan, is that he's talking to Aaron Rodgers or Lil Yachty or about just stuff that it's so oddball, it's so curved that you may not care about the Packers or football or Aaron Rodgers, but watching Aaron Rodgers squirm in his seat with, a conversation about insurance with Caleb Presley is just hilarious. So I would say Sunday Conversations is without question one of, if not the biggest breakout hit for us of 2022. We have two gentlemen, Wallow and Gilly. They have a podcast based in Philadelphia called $1 Million Worth of Game. Wallow spent, I think, 17 years in prison. Gilly is his cousin, who was like a one-hit wonder rap star. And they talk about life. They talk about music. They were in the office yesterday with Stephen A. Smith. And I'm just like, how is it possible that we had an office where I used to take the trash out every day, and we just sat together in a dungeon together. And now we have Stephen A. in our office with the biggest music podcast, having a completely open, creative, cultural conversation about sports and life and whatnot. So I'm really proud of all of our people. Really, we have insanely talented people who work here who are doing. We don't have a lot of most traditional companies, kind of to your point, most traditional media companies are like, okay, you're going to get hired if you're a talent or a personality. If it was you, Ryan, it's like, you're going to get hired to do this one show. You're going to do it this many times. And then you're going to have a producer and a producer and another producer. Somebody's going to tell you exactly what to wear. You're going to have a makeup person make you look exactly as you should look, that you're in a set that is exactly, it's in somebody else's image.
Right.
And there's a lot of people between you and the camera, and there's even more people between you and the audience. And in our world, it's just really different, which is, we have Stephen A. plopped in the middle of a conference room. I've got all these business people pissed off because Wallow and Gilly are taking the conference room and they have a meeting that's supposed to be in there and nobody rescheduled it. And it's like, there's one guy filming it or one girl filming it. So we tend to do things really differently, where we want every piece of content that people create to be in their image and of their opinion. We don't get in the way of that. What we're really good at is how do we put that into all the places we can on the internet and get as much out of it as we can in terms of having it reach people and having it connect with them. So I'm excited about all that stuff.
And that's a little bit of your background in terms of digital marketing and social innovation. So, and that you can see that growth and how that has happened and how that's propelled and taken Barstool forward with
definitely
on the social side, on the marketing side. I want to get back a little bit to the idea of gender equality. And I love that you said, I wasn't even thinking about the fact that I was a woman, it wasn't about me being a woman, but in the past, have you ever felt that there's been gender equality that you faced in this male-dominated business world? Because before Barstool, you worked for many big companies.
Yeah.
And was there any time where you actually felt like this happened or didn't happen because you were a woman?
Oh, totally. I mean, I always say Barstool's like the least sexist place I've ever worked. And the reason that I say that is, look, most companies have a lot of sexism and a lot of equality issues, whether it's gender or racial or whatever it may be. Most of it's very insidious. It's not talked about. It's not challenged. They're not called racist or sexist. Sexual harassment is like insanely, it's still to this day insanely prevalent in business, but it's just silent. Like it's just, it, you don't talk about it. Management doesn't talk about it. And I think that that's really dangerous for women and for minorities, frankly, in any workplace, which is when something is known but not talked about is really the most dangerous place and time. And I went through a lot of that in my career. I mean, I had like a horrible sexual harassment issue with a client when I was in my 20s, and I worked at an ad agency, and I was afraid to lose the account. It was a big account for the ad agency. I didn't want to say anything. I felt like maybe I did something wrong that like brought that on, like all that shit. So, what I would say is that I think it's gotten a lot better for women at work. I think there are more and more examples of women leading and thriving and bringing other women along with them. I think women executives are torn down more than men. They're punished, publicly more than men. They're criticized more than men. They're belittled more than men. But I do think it's a great sign that you are seeing more and more women out there. And I want, every person, but certainly women, to be wickedly successful in what they do. And then I think the bigger thing is, if you're, I was always about the work. And, for me, it was just always about the work. Like I was going to outwork anybody I worked with. I didn't care what color, gender, sex, orientation, personality they had. Like I was just going to outwork you. And that for me was important because it meant that I could hide in the work and focus on the work when all the other kind of bullshit stuff was happening. So, for me, I think for women, it's like, you got to be strong. You got to also check yourself. You know what I mean? Like you got to have a thick skin. You got to call it like you see it. You got to be able to execute. And then when you're being mistreated or you feel like you're being denied an opportunity, you need to say something, and you don't need to like go pound on the table and scream and make a fuss. Like there is a way to address inequity, that is super rational and very, professional. Like, you can address it professionally. And if it doesn't get addressed, then you need to do something about it. You either leave, you take action, you do, so it's like, I try to be like really logical on that stuff, which is, it's going to happen. You're going to encounter it in your career. What are you going to do about it? And how are you going to manage it? The biggest thing, I think, I talk about this a lot, and I'm writing a lot on it, is that I think what's really hard for women in particular is you tend to put yourself in what I would call the gray. Like, I think for women, you can kind of find yourself in a little bit of a gray situation kind of easily, right? Where, and I don't know if you've experienced this, Ryan, but like, okay, you're supposed to do a presentation. The presentation turns into coffee. The presentation's with a bunch of people. It turns into coffee or to drinks with you and the person, who's usually a man who has other designs. A text conversation that starts out as work turns into something that's like work adjacent. So I think, the biggest thing I think for women to be aware of is that there are always people who are going to want to put you in a gray situation where there's ambiguity and there's nuance and there's possibility. And it's at that moment more than any other moment where you need to be alert and kind of vigilant about, what do you want from this? And what do you think you're going to get out of this? Now, look, so you may have a guy who you work with who's hitting on you and you want to hook up with that guy, and like, fine, do it. Like, don't do anything illegal, be sure it's consensual, blah, blah, blah. But there are also situations where, you're treading down a path that has meaning that you may not be comfortable with, right, or that is not your intention to get out of the environment of the situation. And you really have to arm yourself in that environment. And I think that's important for women.
Yeah. And I think it's a lot of younger women that are coming into the workforce and they're getting, their first job, and sometimes it's their dream job, and, they're conflicted, right? So
yeah.
Put in this situation, it's like, well, am I going to throw all of this away for this situation, right?
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
It's tough. And, I think the other thing just to remember is like, your career is going to be really long, and it's going to take all sorts of turns, and you're going to get this dream job that maybe isn't your dream job. And that can be kind of devastating. Like, my dream job was to be a CMO. I got the CMO job at AOL and I was like, oh my God, I hate this job. And I was like, fuck, what have I done? And it was disappointing to me. It was kind of devastating because I had like killed myself to get that job. And then I got it and I was like, I don't want this. So that's okay too. And then you pivot, and maybe the pivot isn't right, but something good will come out of it. And you have to believe in yourself and have hope and faith in yourself that will work out.
Yeah. We just, again, I talk a lot about me personally when I took over the Travis Manion Foundation. So my mom started the organization. My brother was killed in 2007. My mom started the organization, and really we saw it. It's funny because I look at a lot of the correlations between Barstool. We were this local Northeast nonprofit, right? We were in Philly. We were moving up a little bit into the New York area, but like, that's what we were. We were Philly, Jersey, New York, and we were going to support veterans, families of fallen service members in and around this area. And I was like, this is great for my mom. She was a military spouse her entire life. This was at 52 years old, she was finding her career. And it was awesome to see that she was channeling the loss of my brother into that.
Yeah.
She gets sick. She passes away, and the board of directors is like, Ryan, we need you. I was in fashion. I graduated from college and I ran 2 small clothing, high-end clothing boutiques in New Jersey and in Philadelphia. And that's what I had taken out a small business loan before I'd even graduated from college. I knew exactly what I was doing. And so not only did I change industries, but now I was running my businesses. I had a few young girls that worked for me. It was like a little family. Yeah. And now it was like, here, you're up. And at this point, the organization had started to grow exponentially. So we took it from we were about 12, 13 employees at the time when I took over. We're now at close to 80 employees, and we are 75% female at our veteran, run company.
Yep.
And it's awesome to see. Now, our COO is a retired Marine that we always joke he has to deal with all the women, right?
Yeah.
But I will never forget, I shared this story when I talked to some companies about like business or women empowerment. And I went down, I was invited to a roundtable at the White House, and they were invited all the large veteran service organization leaders down there. And I went down there, and when you go to a meeting at the White House, depending on what room you're in, most of them are large conference rooms, and then they have chairs that are lined up on the walls of the room.
Yep.
And that's where all the executive assistants sit,
the aides sit. Yeah.
Aides, whoever you brought to take your notes and hold your water. Yeah. And I walked in, and two strikes against me. I'm new, so nobody knows. I've just been invited via email to attend this, and my name's Ryan. So I walk into the room, and I can see my placard on the table, Ryan Mannion. I'm like, there's me. And as soon as I walked in, the person turned to me, and they're like, oh, you can take a seat over here, and pointed me to the chairs at the wall. And I was like, no, I'm going to be sitting right there. That's me. And, I laughed about it. I didn't take it at this, but, I couldn't wait to go home and be like, they thought I was sitting against the wall.
Yeah, that's right.
But it was that perfect idea of like getting the seat at the table. Women always talk about like, how do we get a seat at the table? And, and a lot of times I'm saying, you just got to sit at it, right? You don't have to always wait to be invited to that table. I see that a lot with women, that they're waiting for that opportunity for somebody to ask. And you talked about that as well. Like, instead of asking, like, share, like, work hard enough that you're automatically going to have that seat at the table.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Totally. That's such a good story. That's so funny. I think that women do tend to wait. There's like something like that just holds you a little bit of like that pause, and that pause just kills you. Like, you can't take that pause. And I think that, I don't know where that comes from. Like, I was having two conversations really randomly this week, one with a financial expert and one with Lo Bosworth, who's created this like insanely successful health company after starring on The Hills. Yeah. And they both were saying that women basically are just like, I know this is a stupid question, but whether it's related to your health or whether it's related to your money. And it's like, I don't know where this comes from. And maybe younger generation of women and, like my daughter or young women won't have it, but like this, like, I'm scared to ask this. It's like, I remember I worked with AT&T, and AT&T had this really brilliant guy. His name was Vance. And what was brilliant about Vance was a Southerner, and, he had a drawl, and he was, very genteel and gentlemanly and whatever. And he always pretended he was so stupid. He was always like, I don't think I really understand. And it was so brilliant because he intentionally was like, help me. Like, I don't think I'm following. He would pretend to be stupid to get you to say more. And then ultimately he'd kill you at the end. You know what I mean? So, but women can use that. Like, don't be afraid to ask a stupid question. Don't be afraid to sit in a seat that's you're not ready to sit in, and that may not be yours. And then the other thing, like I talk about this all the time, which is, I think one of the things that happens to people at work, and, look, in your situation, your family had a heartbreaking tragedy, and so many military families and just families in general have tragedies. And I think one of the things that's so special about what you're doing is, I think a lot of people in life just try to avoid pain. Like, they just try to avoid the catastrophe or the upending of everything. And you know what? Like, it fucking happens. Like, maybe somebody gets killed in the line of duty. Maybe your parents get divorced. Maybe somebody has cancer. Like, it's like, shit happens. And what I love about your mom and what I love about you is you're like, all right, we're going to like suit up and figure out how to do this. Like, you don't know what you're doing. Like, you're like, I'm just going to figure it out. And you figured it out.
Yeah.
And that's kind of it, which is, you just got to figure it out. You're going to screw up every single day. You're not going to get things right. You're definitely going to look stupid. People are going to say you're not qualified. Like, just assume all of that is like, check, check, check. That's fact.
Yep.
But the other thing with it that I think is so important for women in particular, just people who want to move up, is like, do the jobs that nobody else wants. Like, I always find when I go to big companies, like, everybody's chasing the boss. Like, everybody wants the limelight. Like, you want to be petted by someone who has more power or authority or money than you. And I always was like, I don't want to compete with everyone else to get petted. That seems so annoying. And I don't think the person who's petting people is that great anyways. I was like, I'm going to go work on the trash. Like, and I think working on the trash is sometimes like a really good way, or to at least thinking about that, of like, take the projects nobody else wants, take the job that is not sexy, that everybody else isn't fighting for. Because for women in particular, it's a great way to advance, and it's a great way to move forward with less competition. If you're insecure or you're worried about somebody being better than you, go take the stuff that nobody wants and show that you're better, get more confident, get more experience. And I think that can really help.
Yeah, absolutely. I was just having a conversation with a group of female leaders at my organization, talking about, a lot of our younger coordinators right away are saying, like, how do we move up? What comes next? And I'm like, they're like, well, what guidance can we give them? I'm like, the guidance you give them is grow where your seed is planted. Like,
yeah, that's right.
Show us that you are knocking it out of the park in this. And that's it. Like, lean into that trash, right? Like, lean into like where this is your job, and I'm going to do X, Y, and Z around that to show that I'm this beautiful sunflower that needs put in a different pot, And so, but I look at a lot of the young females that work for me, and I love how hungry they are.
They're awesome.
I think it's so awesome. And it's very different, it's very different from when I graduated from college in 2004. And it was just, again, I went into business myself. I was like, I don't want to deal with the corporate world. This is what I'm going to do. I had a passion for it. But even entering into the veteran space, which is, we're nonprofits, but nonprofit is business. I'm running a business.
Totally.
And, right from the very beginning, I was like, wow, like this, there was a lot of things that I learned, a lot of cutthroat practices that were happening. And, you think you're in it for the good. We're all here to help the veteran community. Well, there's a lot of shitty people that are helping the veteran community. Right. So navigate all of that. And, it's been very interesting to watch over the past 15 years, and just navigate that road and get to the place where I finally feel like I can help mentor other young women that are into the workforce.
Yeah, totally. I think that there's, women now are so different than, when I was getting out of college or when you were getting out of college. Like, I think you're right. I think it's a Chaps who's one of our hosts of Zero Blog 30 always says bloom where you're planted, which is a much, much nicer, better. I think it's Colin Powell, right? Like, somebody famous said it. Yeah. But I think it's a much nicer way of saying take out the trash. But there is something to that. I think one of the things that's tough for people right now is that we're inundated with lifestyle on Instagram, on TikTok, on wherever it may be. And all people spend time doing is scrolling. So there's like the doom scroll of everybody else's fabulous life, who they're with, what they're wearing, how skinny they are, like how fabulous everything looks, blah, blah, blah. And there's something, that the Instagramification, I guess, of everything is that all you see is that like finished product, right? Or the contoured face, or the post diet, or whatever it may be. Careers aren't like that. Like, you're not going to get the like, tomorrow you're promoted, right? Which is, and I feel like that's going to be a hardship for young people that, like, let's say I wasn't burdened with that, because when I got to work, it was like, you're going to toil in the basement for longer than you think is humanly possible. You're going to sit there, you're going to take it. you're going to hate it. The more you hate it, the better off it is. You should feel good about that. And then at some point, somebody's going to give you some crack of opening of a door, and you got to push your way through it. So I think what's hard for young people is like, you got to sit in your job for a while. You got to be great at your job. And the reality is you want to be great at your job, because what I spend a lot of time dealing with is the people who moved up too fast, or who got that promotion right when they asked for it or when they wanted it, but maybe weren't totally ready or qualified for it. And the more you get promoted and the less qualified you are, the bigger and harder the fall is going to be once you get to the top. And you know, that there's a danger in that. Like, obviously I want everybody to advance. People should make more money. They should have more responsibility. They should do more things. But you've got to really build substance underneath that, in addition to getting the accolade and the reward for it. And I think that's really important, to always be learning, always be putting yourself in situations where you have to figure stuff out. Being honest when you don't know things. Like, that's my other, like, that makes me fucking crazy. I deal with this all the time. Like, it's actually one of the things I love most about Dave is, you know, when I first met Dave, I expected to find this like blustery, arrogant guy who was like, I know everything. Dave was like, oh, I don't know anything about what you do. Like, why don't you come here? I know how to be funny. I know how to make stuff for the internet. I have no idea. And also I have no interest in what that piece of it. Why don't you come do that? I think saying I don't know is one of the most empowering things there is, because then you motivate people to teach you. And sometimes I think that at work, it's easy to try to want to look good and pretend you know things that you don't. And when you do that, you still look stupid because everybody knows you don't know it. And then you don't ever get the answer.
Yeah, totally. I talk a lot when I'm, you talked a lot about when you were starting, and I always find myself feeling like I'm that parent that talks about how they had to walk 10 miles in the snow.
Like both ways.
Right.
Yeah.
But it's true. Like, things were
Yeah.
a little bit different. Like, you felt like you had to, like, and I think it is, a lot of it has to do with social media. And the role that social media plays in all of our kids' worlds and young people's worlds. It's this crazy phenomenon that frankly has changed how we perceive everything.
Totally.
You know,
and yourself.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. I watch, you know, Bethany Frankel gets a ton of shit for because she has something to say about everyone. But I think she's great at, again, and she's another one. She's a little bit like Dave Portnoy, where like she says things that someone else could certainly get canceled for, but she's non-apologetic for it, right?
Yeah.
Very like, no, that's what I said. That's what I meant. But she also, she keeps it very real on her social media, to the point where I'm like, ooh, you might need a filter on there, right? Like,
totally.
Kind of like age in front of your face. And she came on a few weeks ago and she's like, yeah, you know, here I am. I'm in a plastic surgeon's office because I'm starting to think I'm going to need a little facelift here soon. And I love that because, you know, there's 1,000 other women her age, her stature, that are going and getting that facelift, and they're just showing back up on social media. And
that's right. Looking great.
Yeah, exactly. Let's talk about sports a little bit. So you played sports in high school and college. Is that right?
Yep.
Okay. So one of the things, again, I had said to you when we talked was I was so excited when I saw that you had joined the board at PLL. And Professional Lacrosse League, for those who don't know, Paul Rabel runs it. And, you know, I come from a big lacrosse family. I played lacrosse in college. My dad played lacrosse in college. My brother was recruited to wrestle at the Naval Academy, went to the Naval Academy, and he actually dropped out of the Naval Academy after his first year. Halfway through his freshman year, he was like, this sucks. I hate it. I'm not doing this.
Not for me.
Yeah. And he went to Drexel, and he was all state in lacrosse in high school. And he walked on to the Drexel lacrosse team and played, started as a freshman on the varsity team, for Drexel for 1 year and then decided that he made the biggest mistake of his life and he needed to go back to the Naval Academy. So I say that because we all played lacrosse in college. My daughter just committed to play lacrosse in college, Division I. And, I'd love to know from you what you think about the role that sports plays in the professional world and how you move forward. Because I always say, like, I've got 3 kids. They all have very different skill levels in athletics. And my oldest is going D1, but my other 2 are younger. It's yet to be seen if they're going to be. But regardless, I'm going to push them to play athletics for as long and as far as they can in their career path. And
totally.
It's not because I want them to play sports so much, but because I know the fundamentals that playing sports teach them.
It's so funny. I struggle with this all the time because I have 2 kids who I was like a maniac about playing sports. I loved sports. Most everything I know, I feel like the foundation was built in playing team sports. And my kids are like, my son's a lacrosse goalie. So like, all right, that's good. My daughter is like googly eyes playing lacrosse, which is fine. But, I think that, so here's what I would say. I think that athletics and being part of a team, you just learn so much from that. You learn how to lose. I think learning how to lose is awesome. You learn how to get hurt. You learn how to pass the ball. You learn how to connect with people on the bus ride. Like connecting with the bus rides are the single best part of sports, in my opinion. Like connecting with the notion of a team, the identity of a team, the idea of practice and getting up and doing the same thing in the rain and the sun and all of it. And and the idea of learning something, applying yourself to it and getting better at it. Like I'm all in on that. I agree with you 1,000,000,000% that like sports are such an amazing way to deliver those values to someone, or to kind of indoctrinate those values into someone, which, in a lot of ways, I think the military is a little bit similar in that it's, it teaches you discipline, it teaches you order, it teaches you hierarchy, it teaches you hardship, like resilience, and I think a lot of the things that sports does teach you is resilience, and that's important. I think you can learn it from other places as well. You can learn it from the drama club, you can learn it from this, you can learn it from that. But I really, I think that sports are so captivating. It's beautiful to watch. There's suspense and drama and action and tragedy. And, I really feel fortunate to work in sports. We put on the Arizona Bowl. We did the Arizona Bowl at, almost on December 30th. So right before New Year's Eve, which was Wyoming and Ohio University. It was awesome. Because we did sports the Barstool way, which it was funny. It was a great game. It was comical. It was serious. It was a rivalry. So, I love that. And I think the more you can encourage yourself to push yourself. And I think there's also something to pushing yourself physically, or if you have kids to push themselves. I think that's super important. Like I learned how to play ice hockey maybe 4 years ago. And I taught myself. I had a coach. Like I figured out how to play ice hockey. And what's awesome about it is it was hard. And it was like, I sucked. Yeah. And then I got a little bit better and I got a little bit better. And then I was able to play games. And then, so I think it's that journey and the try to learn something, completely suck at it. Try to do something, completely stink at it, get a little bit better, apply yourself to it, and then see where you go with it. That applies to work and that applies to life.
Yeah. Yeah. I loved watching the Arizona Bowl. I thought that was so great that you guys had
that was so fun.
Taken a bowl. They did such a good job. My 8-year-old, he's a football fanatic. He plays flag football, but he's obsessed with all things football. So every day over the Christmas break, he was like, what bowl game's on today?
That's so cute.
Yeah, what bowl game's on today? And he was dying. And I can't remember, you'll know, the one kid, you talk about how the way you guys approach it is like comical, you bring a different flavor than you're watching any other bowl game. But there was the one kid on the team, his number was 69, but what was his name? on the Ohio team. Do you remember that?
Oh, I know who you're talking about. Keep going. I'll try to think of his name.
He had a name that like matched up with the number 69.
Yeah.
And then Caleb is interviewing the dad, and I mean, the kid went viral. The player went viral, funny. But it was just Travis, my son, was cracking up. He was cracking.
That's so funny.
Yeah. He got a big kick out of, not that he knows what 69,
yeah, but it seems funny.
Right.
Yeah.
Like he got a kick out of like this game actually being funny. The one guy ran out on the field and they had to tackle him.
Exactly.
Like, all of that pomp and like he was cracking up at it. So
oh, that's great. I'm so glad he liked it. That's awesome.
Yeah, and that was a big thing for you guys to be able to get to that
Definitely.
point. Yeah.
Definitely. That was big.
I love it. Okay, so I always end every conversation with a little conversation on resilience. So a lot of people are new to the concept of resilience and what it means. But I always say like everybody has learned resilience at some point in their life. And do you ever think about what resilience means in your personal life? Is it something that you reflect on? Is it something that you practice? And then in the same sense, is it something that you try to bring into the culture at Barstool? So let's start with you personally.
Yeah. I think I'm highly resilient and have had to be. And I think the other thing about life is that you kind of, your resiliency builds over time. The more you put yourself out there, the more you experience, the more you try and fail, the more resilient you're going to become. And I feel grateful that I think compared to some people, I have no resilience. I think compared to other people, I have a lot of resilience. But I do feel like I try to put myself out there. I try very hard. I work very hard. I give a lot. And in doing that, you fail sometimes and you do things, you succeed in others, but mostly you learn, and learning helps you become more resilient. It builds your stamina, it builds your strength, it builds your focus. So, and nothing is perfect, right? Like, I think it's so easy I think there's two things in life that are very easy. It's like, it's easy to assume people don't have any problems, or it's easy to just attack and criticize people for not being perfect. And the reality is like, nobody's perfect. Everybody has problems. We should all have a little bit more empathy to one another and how you get through that. But ultimately, you have to have empathy for yourself, and you have to build this strength inside of you if you want to stay vibrant for a long time. So I think about that all the time. And I try to get better at it every day. I try to always get better at that. I think at Barstool, we have a lot of resilience. We have a lot of grit. Because we had to build this ourselves and nobody wanted to help us. And mostly people didn't want to help us. So the nature of like the pirate ship, and like, everybody's got to row the oars. Everybody's got to make the meal. Sometimes we throw people over the sides. Like sometimes we're in a fight, you know what I mean? So I think Barstool has a very resilient culture. It also has a culture. Another thing I love about the military is that there is a very, it's tribal. You're part of something. And I think the difference in Barstool versus really most media companies and companies in general is that it is tribal. It feels like you are part of something that stands for something. And I think that's really important. It's easier to be resilient if you feel part of something. Totally. And I think that's super important.
Yeah. One of my guests on the podcast was, he's the vice chairman of our board of directors. He's a former chairman of the Joint Chiefs General.
Yeah.
Board. And when I asked him about resiliency, he said, you can't be resilient and be alone.
Yeah, that's right.
You can't be resilient alone. The military is all about camaraderie. It's, and that's why a lot of our service members, when they take off that uniform, they're struggling a little bit because they lose.
It's so alienating.
Yeah, they lose that team. They lose that camaraderie that they felt in the military. And then they also lose that sense of being a part of something bigger than themselves.
Yeah.
Right.
That's right.
So that's the community that we try to give back at the Travis Manning Foundation to our veteran members. And, and I think I want to thank you guys publicly. I mean, we thanked you, but you guys came in, you sponsored our Army Navy tailgate, We had 4,000 individuals come to that
Awesome.
tailgate. It was fantastic. I love how much Dave gets into it, though. He roots for West Point. We have to talk about that, but it's a great camaraderie. And I think he feels that. Like, I could see that when he was at our tailgate, that he really loved being there. Like, I think
he loves it. We love the military. We love veterans, and 100%.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I want to thank you so much. This has been a fascinating conversation. I really enjoyed learning a little bit more about you and, you know, the way you approach business. And it's just been awesome. So
awesome. Really thank you, Ryan.
And while you were talking, you're talking about resilience, and it pops into my head. His name was Titsworth. 69.
Oh, yes.
Titsworth. No, and I'm sitting there going, why am I thinking about this when she's talking about resilience? But that's it. He was funny. You guys do awesome stuff, and not just with Barstool itself, but everything you do outside to help, you know, organizations like us getting out there, Barstool Fund, all of it. There's so much more to talk about, but
awesome.
Yeah, I appreciate it so much. Thank you so much for joining us for another episode of the Resilient Life podcast. Please make sure to like, subscribe, and share with your friends. Erika, thanks again.
Thank you. We'll see you later, Ryan.